and we're now live.
Excellent. Thank you, Hannah. And good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining our online planning advisory committee meeting. As ever, please bear with us if there are any technical issues. And if the meeting has to be halted for any reason, the minutes will be posted on our website as usual. And as a warning, please be aware this meeting is being recorded. All attendees are automatically muted unless asked to speak. I know we've got a couple of presentations tonight. Any other questions, if you could please put them in the Q&A board, and then we'll pick up. And if you want to say something, then Hannah will let you in. As I say, if attendees could ask their questions directly, we can either let them in or we can answer your question accordingly. Councillors, if you wish to make a comment or ask a question, please physically raise your hand so that Hannah or I can see you, and then we can have that discussion. Jane will clerk as normal, ensure we don't miss anything important, and attempt to show any plans, photos on the screen where necessary, and Hannah will take the minutes. Please note, as ever, the meeting is run as a safe space. We encourage all participants to be respectful of others' opinions and views, and please be minded that what you say may impact on the emotions of others. Right, without any further ado, item number 1 on the agenda. My agenda, questions, comments and information from the public first, which don't refer to any of the applications in the appendix. If there's any questions. No, excellent. And likewise, any questions from councillors? No, or excellent. Great. Item number 2, apologies for absence and any declaration of members' interest. Hannah, have we got any apologies?
Yeah, we've got apologies from Anita Collier, Lizzie Boyle and Andy Palmer.
Great, thank you very much. And any declarations of interest this week? No. Great, thank you very much. Item number 3, to agree the minutes of the meeting held 18th of February. If everyone has had a look at the minutes, could I ask someone to propose them, please? Thank you, Anne, and a seconder. Thank you, John, and all those in favour. Thank you very much.
That's unanimous. Thank you.
Great. Right. Item number 4. Consider the major plan applications as per the appendix, and I think we have. Jane, I'm going to hand over to you at this point because I think you've got the running order.
We're going to discuss application number 501 on our list first, which is the Malthouse Lane Business Centre at Commerce Park in Frome. Hannah, if you could please make Geraint Jones and Rob Lucas as panellists.
Okay, just to let the attendees know that now these people are panellists, they can see any questions that are put into the chat and who's attending the meeting. Was it Rob Lucas as well, Jane?
Yes, please, yeah.
Okay, here we go.
Okay, just while they're coming in, so the description for this application is an industrial development comprising of 61 small business units to be constructed in 2 phases on area E2, and a single industrial building comprising 2 15,000 square feet units on area E1. And they have listed the use class designations. Just to make it easier, they will be B1, B2 and B8, and maybe later, if needs be, I'll run through and explain what those use classes mean. And also just to explain why we're discussing this application now, because this application actually falls within Berkeley Parish. We don't automatically receive a consultation from the District Council as we do normally on our applications. So we were actually contacted by residents at Colway Lane, to ask what our views were on this application, and actually we didn't know about it, so that's why we're bringing it now. I've also been asked just to clarify that some of you may be aware that there has been a neighbour consultation on behalf of Aitchison and Aitchison, who currently have premises at Commerce Park, which does adjoin this application site. That is not actually part of this application, so they just wanted me to clarify that, because there seems to have been some confusion with the comments that have been made online regarding this application. Okay, so perhaps if we could invite, I'm not sure whether it's going to be Geraint or Rob to perhaps talk us through the plans for their application.
Can I share a little presentation with you?
You can indeed, yeah. You're welcome to turn you have to turn your camera on first, though, I think.
I think I might have to make you co-host, so let me just do that now. There we go, Rob, you're co-host now, so you should be able to share your screen.
Okay. I'm going to share this and Geraint's going to start talking.
Thank you.
Evening all, thanks very much for allowing us to present you tonight. So our intention is just to run through briefly Rockhaven's application, but more than that is for the questions and answer session, just to deal with any particular queries or concerns you've got. So I'm Geraint Jones, Planning Director at Savills, and I've acted as planning consultant at the Commerce Park site for the last 15 years. And obviously I'm joined by Rob, who's a partner at David Brain Partnership and is the lead architect for the site. Rob, if you want to move on to the next slide.
Yeah.
So I just want to give you a little bit of background to the planning history. Obviously it's quite a large site. I'm sure that you're all well aware of it, given its size and location. But just wanted to talk through that planning history and how that relates to the current application. So the wider site was granted planning permission back in 2005, and since that period it's proved very successful, and there's been numerous applications taking us through to where we are now. So the vast majority of those applications were reserved matters approvals under the original outline consent. The ability to submit detailed proposals under that outline consent is now spent. The time's gone. So applications need to come forward as detailed applications now. What we've ended up with on the site, I'm sure you know, it's been very successful. There's approximately 100 smaller local companies who are home at this site, but there's also some larger regional employers. You mentioned Aitchison and Aitchison being one of them. There's a pretty good relationship with the local community as a result of the management company that was set up at the time of the original outline consent, so back in 2005, and that monitors any complaints, queries, anything like that, and on the few occasions where anything has arisen, they've been able to deal with those relatively quickly. Now, the nature of the development is it's built out from the sort of northeast. And we're now getting to the tail end of the site. The southern part of the site that you can see highlighted in yellow is the current application site. So Rob, if you go to the next slide, I'll just talk very briefly about how that relates to what's being consented, because although this part of the site hasn't yet been built out, there are underlying planning permissions that remain implementable on this part of the site. So what you can see on the slide before you now in yellow is one of the underlying planning permissions that could be implemented, and in the sort of darker greys are the proposal that's now before you. So you can see actually in terms of layout there's not a significant difference between the two. What this application does though seek to do is to look more closely at the mix of uses and respond to what the market demand is for the site. I think it's pretty clear that with where we've gone, it was happening before the pandemic, but the sort of move to online retail has been particularly significant, and a lot of the successes, particularly the smaller operators at the site, have been those kind of smaller businesses that the eBays of this world, small retailers just starting out and needing small areas of space. So the area E2 that you see before you is made up of smaller units that would respond to that kind of local demand. And then area E1A and E1B over at the eastern end of the site. Well, it's a slightly bigger unit at that location, so offering sort of opportunities for established businesses with more of a regional presence. I think probably I'll leave it there. Happy to answer questions. I did see something pop up about the management group, so it's probably just worth me noting before Rob picks up on the detail that a full application granted here would be bound to, or we would offer it to be bound to, all of the same constraints and conditions that were applied at outline stage. As I say, there's a well-established management company in place, and so we would look for this application to be tied back to that. So you'd have one cohesive management of the site, and that's actually required legally when people come and occupy anyway, but it's also tied through the planning process as well as any sort of lease agreements with end users. So Rob, I'll let you talk through some more detail about those proposals.
Okay. So I'll start with the drawing that's in front of you, the site plan, and just leave on the consented schemes in yellow for the time being. As you can see, I've tried to design the layout closely with what's already been consented, certainly in the area E2, with the same number of entrances off of the road and basically the same yard layout. The reason for putting the sort of long blocks at the bottom towards the bund is to help with the noise control on the site. They basically back onto the bund and create a sort of noise buffer. And over in area E1, as you can see, we've slightly changed the layout there and moved the larger block to the sort of bottom of the site near the bund. Again, that sort of helps with the orientation in terms of noise control to the residential units, which are just below. I mean, you can see that on that. These are the residential units, but they are over a 4 meter high bund with a 3 meter high acoustic fence on top of it. So that's the reason for the change. The other sort of design constraint is the overhead electricity cables which run on that green zone there, so we've got to avoid those. And then the next drawing is the actual layout itself, which forms the application, and that just shows the breakdown of units. Some of these initial units are back to back, and the ones along the bund are generally sort of like terrace units with varying different sizes of units to meet the demands of the occupier. We are actually looking to, as part of the application, we're looking to phase the development. So only half of E1 would be constructed to start with, and then the other half would follow on. Okay, so that's the layout. This gives you an idea. It's just one typical example of an elevation. If you're familiar with Commerce Park, you'll have seen a lot of these because we've done 3 very similar schemes already constructed and all fully occupied on the site. That's just a sort of typical mono-pitch terrace unit that would be alongside the bund. And each unit gets a front door and a sectional door for deliveries and that sort of thing. But you'll see from the layout that there is no requirement for large articulated lorries to enter most of the E2 area, because the units are so small, there's no demand for that. Although we have allowed some turning in the sort of forecourt at the very end of the site. This is a sort of overall elevation of the along the street, and just gives you an idea of what the whole development looks like together. And this, if you can see my cursor, this is an elevation of the larger unit at the on the E1 part of the site. I should say that another difference between what we're doing now and what we did when we achieved the current consents is that the units are slightly lower. They're about a meter and a half lower in general, because that just suits because of through sort of experience of working with these schemes. We found that they don't necessarily need to be very tall buildings, and so a typical mono pitch like that will have an eaves height at the rear around about 5 meters and around about 6.5 meters at the front, 5 at the back, whereas the consented scheme is, I say, 1.5 meters taller on both aspects. And then the final picture is a typical view of what the units look like when they're built. Some of these are actually at Commerce Park, and some are built in other parks in the region, Swindon, Gloucester, and over in Westbury. But those are just some current photographs, so you can see the general sort of idea. This photo, if you can see my cursor, this photo at the bottom is Jensen Court, which is on the site at Commerce Park, and this top corner one is the original enterprise zone scheme, which is again at Commerce Park. So we've been doing it for some time now, as you can see. I think I probably could finish it there, and happy to take any questions. So I'll leave the pictures up, yeah, just in case anyone wants to talk about anything that we're showing there.
Yep, that's great. Thanks very much. Right, questions I've got. I've got Mark. Got Mark first. You're muted, Mark.
That never happens. Have we done any research? Has the management company done any research of where your tenants and their employees come from? We're particularly concerned in the town about access to, clean ways of getting to and from work. If all your employees there came from Frome, then we could easily help you or help put you in the right direction of green ways of getting people to your factories and units there. But if they're coming from other places using the A36 or whatever, that's probably not so easy for us to do. Do we have any data on that whatsoever?
Probably the easiest way to answer that is the original permission had a travel plan associated with it to try and encourage sustainable movements. Obviously, the nature of where it's located, there will be people that come from outside Frome to work there, and it's difficult to control that necessarily. So I don't think I definitely don't have any information with me now which confirms precisely where employees come from, and I don't think the management company are asked to collect that, which is something that sometimes happens on very modern schemes being granted now. In terms of whether there's any ability to control it, I think because there's an underlying permission on this site, that's probably not something that we're able to control. But if there was something that you wanted to encourage and engage with the management company on, I'm sure they'd be open to that discussion.
Well, I think if I can come out with a second comment, we are a town that's interested in helping people make sensible travel decisions, and if it meant that we could point you in this direction of having a bus coming from Westbury railway station, or some sort of electric vehicle coming from the centre of town, or ways to reduce car use going into there, which would reduce the overall pollution aspect of it, particularly close to houses on the outskirts there. I think that would be a very helpful way forward and make us more amenable to thinking this is a good idea.
Yeah, I mean, I think the management company would be very, very happy to engage with you on that. I suppose from a very pure planning sort of policy and legislation perspective, as to whether something could be tied to this planning permission or not, if it was granted, because there's an underlying planning consent there that exists to allow sort of industrial units to be built there already. It's probably not something that could be tied to the planning permission per se, but that doesn't mean that the occupier isn't willing to have a discussion and just explore it outside of the planning application.
Thank you, that would be helpful.
Okay, thanks, Mark. I've got Rich and then Paul.
Sorry, muted there. This sort of follows on from Mark's points about transport, really. Hadn't really realised you'd already got permission for this, essentially, because it doesn't normally come to us, which is great. It's all fine. And actually, I'll say in however many years it is I've been on this board, it's one of the very few applications for workspace that I've had to deal with. So it's very interesting. Thank you for bringing it up to us. I'm just interested in, you've already got a cycle path or a series of cycle paths or multi-use paths on site. Would there be any scope anywhere for extending those paths, particularly to get access to already a track, which is a dirt track, and so on? Is there any chance that you could make that happen?
Sorry, I think you cut out the critical moment there as to...
is there any chance that you could make some of that happen, tarmac the path to make it a connection with Stonebridge?
Which path, sorry, you cut out before
Sorry,
you said...
there's a cycle path on site.
Cycle path around there, isn't there?
Yeah. So if you extend the cycle path, it leads to a track at the end of the cycle path that goes around the back of the bund towards Stonebridge. So on your diagram, it's bottom right, where the actual site, Commerce Park, finishes, and then you turn right and go along, heading left, I suppose, and that takes you to I forget what the road is now, but there's a connection into Stonebridge estate, which is already marked for cycles, but it could do with some tarmac on it.
Well, I suppose the straight answer is happy to have a discussion about anything that you think would be helpful in terms of promoting sustainable transport. It's not something that's been flagged with us in the past. I don't think it obviously wasn't a requirement when the site itself was delivered. But if it's something that's necessary for the application, we would definitely look at it. And even beyond the scope of the application, I think we're always happy to have a conversation if there's something that we can help facilitate.
Okay, thanks for that. And I am happy to see employment there on.
Yeah.
Thanks, Rich. Rob?
Yeah.
Do you mean me, Paul?
Sorry, Paul.
Yeah,
I'm
Rob.
Paul.
Rob.
Thanks, Steve. Yeah, I mean, a couple of points, but I mean, I continue in that transport issue, really. I understand from what you're saying that there's possibly no way through the planning system that we can kind of impose extra measures from you, but really, we want to kind of appeal to your sense of doing the right thing, I guess, really in terms of kind of environment, etc., and do everything that you can really to encourage alternative methods of travel to the site, mostly from Frome, but as Mark said, I believe from Westbury, etc., as well. And one of those things, I commend the plans, because you have got cycle parking, and it appears to be covered cycle parking, which is quite unusual. So that's very commendable. However, the The cycle parking seems to be a bit of an afterthought. It's kind of tucked away on the periphery of the site. It's not close to the buildings. People that cycle to work possibly would rather have their cycles closer to the building where they can keep an eye on them, etc., rather than be kind of, you know, way out at the end of the car park. So that's one thing. I think some of the units probably haven't got cycle parking, so it'd be great to see cycle parking for every unit. And the other thing that I'd like to propose is that maybe the management company could set up some even more secure cycle parking, which would encourage people to travel by e-bike. And this is the kind of a more modern way of, you know, this is the way of the future, e-bikes, for people to travel much further to work without the effort of and getting sweaty, etc., etc. But of course, as we know, e-bikes are very expensive. They're still very expensive. So actually, what we need is really good, secure cycle parking undercover where people can leave their expensive e-bikes. And it's a way of encouraging people to think about alternatives rather than just feeling that, you know, you've got far more car parking spaces than you have bicycle parking spaces. The assumption is everyone's just going to drive there, but actually we really need to start changing these assumptions. And as you say, the planning system might not be able to force you to do that kind of thing because you've already got planning permission. But we'd like to appeal to you really to bring those kind of measures in as far as you can and improve this application. That's one. Can I just ask a quick question? Regards, I'm sure that others may bring this up anyway, but just regards the uses, the use classes. There seems to be many objections because of change of original use classes. They were restricted, I think, to is it B2? Or B1? Was it B? Yeah, the original.
It was B1. Yeah.
Yeah. So and now changing. So yeah, carry on.
Shall I? There's obviously a couple of points there before Rob comes back to talk about the detail of the cycle parking where it sits on the layout. If I can come back to that wider point about the ability to secure transport measures, I've seen a couple of comments pop up about this being a full planning application, and there's obviously, I guess that's raising the point about the established planning permission that's on the site. So I'm getting a bit of feedback. I don't know if someone's. Oh, that's better. The established planning permission that's on the site and how that interrelates. So the planning permission that's on there at the moment, and that was shown on Rob's plan, which has got so you can see how the buildings compare to what we're now proposing. That's a consented scheme that could be built out. What really differs from that is relatively minor changes to the layout. And obviously the use class, which I'll come on and talk to briefly in a second. But when the council considers this, or when Mendip Council considers the application and determines it, even though it's a full application, they've got to be mindful of material considerations, and that ability to implement that established planning permission is material. And that's why unless there's been significant changes which warrant asking for new items, whether that be transport or anything else, that if we can continue to be bound by the underlying planning permission, and that's normally reasonable. That's not to say you can't entertain a discussion about those things, but it's particularly relevant. So that's why I'm cross-referencing that, because we do have a planning permission in place on the site that could be implemented, and officers will find that material when determining this one. Rob, do you want to pick up on the cycle parking where it's disputed across the plot before I go on to the use class point?
Yeah, as I say, we've done a number of these schemes around the area, and the preference from local authorities is generally to have the covered cycle parking in a sort of larger bay as shown on this scheme. Although we have the alternative to that is probably just separate uncovered sort of Sheffield stands, which you would see quite commonly around, and we have done that on as an alternative. It's difficult to sort of indicate more of the covered ones, because they tend to be, you know, multiple use items, you know, so they'll have sort of half a dozen bikes in them, and they effectively take up you know, a parking space, if you like. So you could perhaps split down the larger ones that I've got there and create another one, but then that would have as you rightly pointed out, will have an effect on the parking. So the main alternative is to go from uncovered to, go from the covered ones I've shown to uncovered, which could be dotted around and cover all the units, or keep with something like what we've got, which is 2 larger covered bays.
Can I just come back on that, because there seems to be a slight misunderstanding or confusion there. I'm not quite sure. What I'm suggesting, if we're looking at area E1, for instance, I can only just about see it size-wise, but the cycle parking is effectively in a car parking bay on the periphery of the site, so as far away from the building as you can get. Oh no, if you go, I'm in E1. I'm using E1 as an example. Yeah, right. So the cycle parking is at the top of that site, isn't it? As far away from the building as you can get. Right. I'm suggesting you swap the car parking space, you know, nearest the building. Maybe you leave the disabled one, I don't know, but nearest the building with the covered cycle parking, and you put a parking space on the periphery. It's just swapping them over. I'm not talking about separating them out into smaller, for instance, there. So yeah, covered closer to the building. And I think possibly you're talking about on the other site, because some of the units don't have cycle parking at all, you're suggesting that the reason is because you've kind of lumped it all together for the whole area into one cycle.
It has been a preference of some.
Yeah, but it's quite. I mean, it's interesting in a way, isn't it? That your figure is quite interesting. I think that, you know, you can park 6 bikes, possibly more, in one car parking space. So, you know, it's actually really efficient use of space. So we need to be doing everything we can to encourage people to cycle or use public transport or whatever to get to work in these places. And actually, there's little cost to developers, because you lose potentially, you know, 1 or 2 parking spaces, and you can encourage, you know, potentially 20 people to cycle to work. So anyway, that's a comment. Maybe we'll move on to the use classes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, we're happy to take those comments on board, because obviously while the application is submitted, there's still an opportunity for us reviewing and amending where that's appropriate. So we will take that one away. In terms of the use classes, obviously there was a restriction on the southern part of this site as to what uses could be implemented there. This is when the original consent was granted back in 2005. And what the condition effectively did was said within 75 metres of the boundary of the site, the uses shall be B1 uses, which traditionally are seen as being more appropriate to locate near to residential properties. But obviously what we've got here at the southern end of the site is a very significant separation between the residents to the south and the employment area through the acoustic bund and the fence on top. So I think Rob mentioned earlier, the acoustic bund itself is 4 metres high, and then there's a fence on top, which is another 3 metres. So in terms of probably the key issue that was raising concerns at the time for members was the potential for noise nuisance to residents arising from the site. And what we've got now is, with each application that's been submitted here, we have to evolve a noise model to prove what the cumulative impact for the site will be. And now we're at this point in time, we're able to look at that in a bit more detail. I should say the reason why B1 uses aren't coming forward here, it's a market demand point. B1 uses are predominantly focused on things like offices or light industrial, and they don't give the flexibility that we're looking for here, particularly B8 uses. So you can see from the layout, the majority of the uses that are proposed are pretty small units, and the experience across the whole site is what they're going for. It's not people with heavy machinery, it's people with small businesses that do a lot of sort of online retail and those kind of things. And so the current restriction on use class would prevent those people from coming in. So what we really want to do is expand out what's happened elsewhere on the site and been very, very effective, very successful, and not creating significant noise issues or anything else like that, and allow them to occupy in this area. Now, in terms I talked earlier on about the management company and the controls of the outline application being carried through. What they're setting aside, this 75 metre boundary that was put in place, that was sort of a line in the sand, but it didn't have a technical basis for doing it. It wasn't a case where we were saying, if you're 80 metres away and you're a B1, B2, B8 operator, that you wouldn't have an impact because of the distance separation, but if you're 70 metres away, you would. It was much more, I suppose it was something for a lay person to feel comfortable with, rather than something that was technically proven by assessing an evidence base. So what we've now got is an evidence base that allows us to try and interrogate that and test that, and this application effectively does that. And we've had quite long and detailed discussions and evolving that model with the council's environmental health officers to make sure that they're comfortable that it's robust. And it shows that, on the assumption that we continue to be bound by all the noise controls that sit within the outline planning permission, and those noise controls say that at certain parameters you shall not, at certain locations you shall not exceed certain noise levels in the day, and then it's also got a noise regime that you shan't exceed during the evening. This will operate within those noise controls, so we're happy to be bound by the noise controls that the wider site is contained by, and that as a result we feel achieves a suitable residential environment for people adjacent to the site. So it's not the fact that the original planning permission did put this in place, but it wasn't an evidence-based reason for doing so. And with planning, you really should have it should be evidence-based, but it wasn't at that point in time for whatever reason. Now what we have is something that we can properly test, and the environmental health officer will conclude whether they're comfortable that our noise and assessments are robust, and whether the conditions that we propose to be bound by will continue to protect that residential amenity. So happy to expand on that further, because I'm sure that might raise questions.
That's great for now, thanks.
I'm scrolling down trying to see anyone's hand that's up.
There's two attendees that have hands up if councillors finished. We've got Adam Boyden and Janine Nash.
Right. Okay. Let's go, Janine, ladies first.
Okay, I'm just going to allow you to talk. Okay, Janine, you should be able to talk now.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, thank you. This is really really informative. I've got to say that on a personal level, as ward councillor in Berkeley, I didn't know that there was a management company in place, and I can honestly say that the residents that have written to me about this didn't appear to know either, which was my main question for asking about contact details in the first instance. And the reason I bring that up is because you're having conversations now about the noise attenuation as it stands, about the relevance of the bund and what that seeks to achieve. But actually, the complaints I'm getting are in respect of the noise already in existence. Excuse me, sorry, my children in the background. And so my question is, if the management company is only new to me now and it's only new to my residents now, how can you be sure that that the existing complaints are being dealt with properly, and how can you extrapolate that further into what's proposed going forwards?
Okay, thankfully, I think, helpfully, I should say, someone seems put the contact details up for the management company there. So if you didn't see those, I'm happy to provide them afterwards, so you can have direct contact. And I'm not sure why that you haven't received those previously.
Thank you.
The management company is very happy to engage, and my understanding, I'd have to go back to the precise detail, that there is regular contact with is the Colway Lane Residents Association. Was okay. My understanding that they because when this was originally set up, obviously one of the key drivers was that the Residents Association had the opportunity to engage with the site, and if there was an issue, that it can be dealt with quickly. And I know there's been examples where a problem was identified, it was brought to the attention of the management company to do with some external, I think it was sort of like an air conditioning unit, and it had a bearing that was had failed and was causing a noise. It was flagged, and maintenance went in and dealt with it, and it was resolved. So there is a process to go through where there are concerns. So if there are concerns about noise being raised that aren't being brought to the management company's attention, then that's obviously something that there is a process there to deal with. Maybe that needs wider publicising that route, and obviously if you've got their contact details, then that's a great point of contact to come through you. If they're flagging it with you rather than the management company directly, at least you know where to direct them. In terms of the level of noise, there's been monitoring of the estate in conjunction with the environmental health officer at the moment, and I know he's been pleasantly surprised with the level of noise that's been raised there. It's well within the limits that are set by the outline. So I don't know what the particular concerns are that have been raised, but if they're one-off incidents that haven't been picked up in the monitoring, then obviously that's something that we're able to look at, and the management regime for the site can deal with that. In terms of the modelling exercise that's been done to support this application, that takes account of all the noise generation that's currently generated by the site, and then adds this into it to see what the cumulative impact would be. And my understanding is it falls well within the limits that the outline has set. So I suppose there's always planning tests what is reasonable rather than maybe what can be heard. So there could be a distinction between what somebody hears and what a planning authority is allowed to refuse planning permission against. But that's me speculating. Ultimately, there are processes in here to control to an acceptable level as determined by the planning authority. So I hope that's sort of gives a useful overview, but happy to go further if you want to.
No, that's really helpful. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Jenny. Hannah, could you let Adam speak, please?
Hello there. Thank you.
Hi, Adam.
Hi. Yes, I've just looked at the website. The complaints that the objections are coming in. I have heard from several residents in the college ward as well as others, and it's the main concern is the usual one. It is the change of use, and the frustration amongst probably the majority of residents. I know not all, but the majority of residents who live the other side of the bund and the fence, in that the outline permission did limit the business, the reserved matters applications to B1 business, which is now E instead, and it did prevent warehouses and general industrial developments being sited next to the bund. I know that outline permission no longer applies. It's a full application, and it'll be judged on its merits, as Watson's Gym was, as Aitchison was. But how, given that this is a sort of speculative application, in that there's no details of the occupiers of the warehouse units or of the other smaller units as yet, could you give any reassurance of the sort of businesses you're going to want to attract to this site, so that residents can perhaps be a bit more reassured than they currently are about the change of use on the application?
Yeah, okay. I think there's probably a couple of things. One, the committing to the layout that's before you is probably helpful, because what you see with the while we've got the noise bund and the acoustic fence, also by having units that back onto that bund and have all their openings facing to the north, that means generally there's the ability to control noise that's generated within those units. So they almost create another layer of barrier, even though that so when you're modelling, you can interpret where the noise is being directed to by limiting openings in a building. That's always helpful. By focusing movement and any courtyards the other side of the buildings away from residential properties, that helps too. But I suppose the critical thing here is, and the experience that's we've had across the site, the Area E2 is focused on smaller operators, so you can see the dividing lines there. These aren't significant big industrial units. They're small units which are generally, a couple of people operating out of them, and they typically focus. What we've seen a real boom of in particularly the last sort of 5 to 10 years, but really extrapolated in the last sort of 18 months and predicted to grow, is that growth of logistics and online retail, and that's at all scales, but particularly at lower levels. So the difficulties that retail is having on the high street and had before the pandemic have been accentuated by the pandemic, and what's filling the gap is we're still all spending our money, but we're spending it in a different way and often online now. So these smaller units, there's a real market demand for them, and there's been real success, not just here in Frome, but right across the UK with units of this scale. So the nature of what these people like the occupiers are doing isn't sort of your B2 industrial heavy industrial uses that you'd expect. That historically might have existed on industrial units. So the reason for the split is that because the split is there is elements in these kind of uses. There is elements of B1 because there's people doing their office, their administration, and light industrial work. There is a significant proportion of B8, which is the coming and going storage and distribution from these facilities, and then there's a small degree of B2, but B2 is the heavier industrial uses, but it's sort of very nominal in the grand scheme of what we're talking about in terms of the floor space. So the noise assessment that's been tested sort of draws from that and looks at what those splits are like to be, on the basis that we've got numerous examples, not just on this site, but elsewhere within the region, where you can go and test the kind of noise that's generated. But beyond that, there's controls anyway, which sort of controls how you can operate these at different times of the day, particularly in the evening. So I don't know if that sort of helps to start to explore it for you.
Yeah, thank you. That helps on that one. Thank you. The second concern, I think, is some of the residents, is that will they be able to see the large warehouse on the east end of the site from their residential area? Are you doing any sort of visualization of that? or sections of that. So I couldn't see anything in the application itself, whether it be visible. It's quite a high building.
Yeah,
the bund in the fence are high too, but it's actually going to be higher than that.
I'll let Rob come in a moment, but I'll just say we've produced cross sections in the past to deal with this issue on previous applications, because and the reality is it's not the bund that blocks the views here, it's the band of trees which sit to the south of the bunds, because they're closer to the residential properties. They pretty much limit any significant views, but what we found previously when we tested it, even if you imagine that the trees weren't there, an eye-line view from an upper bedroom window on the properties to the south, an eye-line view, you're still looking upwards because you're talking about a 7-meter combined bund and an acoustic fence, so that your line of sight to these buildings is upwards. So when we're looking at the kind of scale of buildings we're talking about here, you wouldn't see them, but we have offered to case officer that we'd be happy to do further cross sections. Rob, do you want to come in on that and explain what you've offered to Anna?
Yeah, well, I've asked her when she wants them by.
Oh, great.
And then we're going to have a discussion about exactly where she wants them, because we may need to do some more survey work to base them off. But we have got some historic sections through area E1, and we can probably use those. But I don't anticipate being able to see it.
Well, that's good. It's just to demonstrate that in the application, to give reassurance that it's not actually a reason for a refusal or objection. I think that's what it needs to show.
I don't think seeing it is necessarily a critical factor, but I know that is what people ask. And
yeah, we've got storage base after all, haven't we? You can see that for miles.
Yeah, you can see that for a long way. That's not one of mine, by the way.
Oh, that's good.
It's probably worth saying that the applicant has said that you know, he's I mean, Rob mentioned there about the need for additional survey work. You know, if there were sort of particular locations that you said I'm interested, maybe from here and here, it's just we'd like to agree that with Anna Clark and interested parties before we go and do it. So rather than do a cross section that someone might come back in the future and say, well, actually, if you'd done it 10 meters to the side, that might give you something different. We'd rather agree from the outset exactly where it needs to be done, and that's what we did last time. And at least we all know that we're assessing the locations that you're most interested in, and then at least that will give full confidence to the officers. That
Thank you. I think Janine and I and Drew will go away and have a think, I think, about that. My last question is about climate and ecology. The Mendip, Frome Town Council, Somerset even have declared climate and ecological emergencies. What's your application going to do to help us lead greener lifestyles? I noticed that there's lots of car parking, there's cycle parking, there's no obvious proposals for solar panels on roofs. There's lots and lots of roof space here. A lot of it would be south facing, which would be ideal for solar roof tiles even. The Colway Lane is accessible. You can walk from Frome to the site through the bund along the back of Colway Lane, but it's a muddy track. And I've done it myself yesterday and today because I had to go to Ricky Fenby's. But so that's not an attractive route for commuters at all. How can you help people not have to get in a car to work there? Because everybody will. There is no bus route. There never has been. I would assume now there never will be, because, as you say, it wasn't put in first. There is a bus stop, I think, but no bus route that serves it. What can you do for the climate and ecological emergency for this development? Because at the moment, it doesn't look like there's really anything at all. Thank you.
In terms of the cycle route, I know that the Colway Lane route that you described there, whether that should have been surfaced or not was something that was discussed at the time of the outline application, because I think there was the option there to do it, and the footpath officers and others involved at the time pushed it back against that because they wanted to retain it as a sort of a rural walking route rather than something that was tarmacked. So whether that was right or wrong, that's the reason why that wasn't done at the time. And obviously, there is cycle access and pedestrian access into the site through on those sort of zigzag bits of the acoustic fencing. So you can get in there.
Yes.
So the links back into the links back in there exist, and I share the point that I'm a keen cyclist myself, and I share the point that was raised earlier about electric bikes. I'm based in Bristol, and not just bikes, but seeing sort of the electric scooters that are being trialled in Bristol at the moment. The amount of ground that gives people the opportunity to cover. So if you're based in Frome and you're trying to get out to a location like this, I'm sure that those kind of modes of transport are going to become more and more popular, particularly as they become cheaper. I know the sort of things like the cycle to work is now that they removed the limits on the cycle to work scheme so that people could purchase electric bikes, and the electric bikes are coming down in price very quickly. So I think there's a lot of the biggest thing going for this site really, because it's difficult to get bus companies to continue to serve locations that don't suit routes that they already have. The biggest thing for this site is going to be people on sort of small sort of single person electric vehicles, whether that's bikes, scooters, whatever else may come in the future. The proximity to Frome means that that's an ideal way to travel, and as you say, as someone said earlier, it helps you to arrive not sweaty, which cycling from home to my work in Bristol, going up and over the downs and down the other side, you definitely don't turn up not sweaty.
Thank you. And I'm assuming at some point there'd be electric vehicle charging on site. Is that something you're prepared to include for now?
What's been done with Rockhaven on other schemes is providing the ducting to the front of properties, basically, which gives you the flexibility to do things in the longer term. So it's facilitating it so that each end user can choose what they want. I mean, that's something that can definitely be explored.
I think we should explore that. Thank you. Yeah.
So,
and Anna Francis, Frome Town Council's former resilience officer, did try it with other town councillors. Did try and get a bus route to the site, and it of course it didn't work. But that's I'm name dropping Anna Francis from Frome Town Council because everyone loves her. Thank you.
I've always understood that the reason that there isn't a bus is because the site wasn't fully occupied. But if this scheme goes in, there's more chance of getting a bus service.
Yeah, I think that's
one serves the other. Just on the point about the solar panels, with the smaller units, it's more difficult to introduce those because obviously you've got a number of users. We have done it before on another scheme where all the panels went onto one of the units and just fed back into the grid. But what we found on the larger units is that the occupiers often put it in later on under effectively permitted development.
Rob, presumably the buildings are designed so that they can take the weight of solar panels if that is something that someone wants to pursue.
They will be, yeah.
Okay, thanks. Sheila, I can see you got your hand up.
Thank you. I think this point about solar panels is quite an interesting one. I'm wondering whether, Nikki, you might want to contact Freco at this point, because they may have a way of doing something that's cheaper for a whole area rather than individual ones, and it may well be useful for this particular project. Freco is a Frome-based energy company, and they've certainly put solar panels around town on things like the health centre, the football club, and various other places. So it might be, you know, if it's collaboratively done, there might be a cheaper way of doing it.
Happy to have that conversation. If someone wants to put them in touch with us, very happy to open that up.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
that would be great. Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Like you said on the EV charging points, would there be sort of wiring at the build stage for anyone who wants to put solar panels? I mean, it's much cheaper to do it at the build stage than to retrofit, isn't it?
Yeah, what we've had on other sites would be, it was the debate about you might have a policy which requires you to put in you know, maybe a couple of electric charging points, not a significant number. So in terms of what you're required to do as a policy test might not be significant, whereas actually in terms of future proofing the development, what's better to do is to look at this kind of ducting arrangement where, so rather than ending up with wires trailing across footpaths in the future, you get the ducting. So with all of these developments, you'll see there's footpaths which run along the front of each of the units. So by having ducting which gets you to the other side of that footpath arrangement, then in the future you can put stuff in without needing to dig up those footpaths and without causing difficulty. So that's what we've looked at elsewhere, and then it gives end users the ability to do what they choose. And I think that future proofing is probably more important than actually putting in something which is maybe suitable for electric charging points as they may be today. You know, these things are always evolve and they evolve rapidly. So I think that's probably something that we're I don't know whether that conversation has started, Rob, yet, in terms of Section 106 and any commitments, but those, I think those will be things that we can look at with the officers in terms of any conditioning.
Yeah, we haven't discussed it yet, but it's certainly the best way forward, I think.
Question from me is regarding the you mentioned about the Mendip Environmental Health Officer that you'd spoken to. Will he be issuing a report, do you know?
What they do is they'll issue a consultation comment on the application. Okay. So they effectively comment on the reports that we've submitted. So he'll be giving his professional view. It'll probably be a couple of pages, but what we've done over probably the last 6 to 12 months, partly elongated because of what's gone on and the ability to get together on site and those kind of things. What we've done is explored the modelling. When the original planning permission was set up, we were required to do ongoing modelling of the noise being generated on the site, and then evolve that. So every time an application came in, you'd sort of plug in the new bit of anticipated development and see how that grew as a model. But what was very clear was that the model was misrepresenting the reality. So when you actually went and tested the noise on site, the modelling was showing noise levels which were going to be higher than the reality. So now that the whole site is, well, the vast majority of the site is built out, we can be much more accurate. And so what we said to the EHO about 12 months ago, look, there's such a disparity between the two. If we're going to bring in applications for the southern part of the site in the future, what we need to do is make sure that modelling is properly tested and is based on real world position. So that's what's been evolved over the last 6 to 12 months. So the EHO has been very key in establishing what the parameters should be to that document. So I would hope that they'd be satisfied with it, but I haven't seen their consultation response yet.
Okay, thanks very much. So any more questions from anyone? More comments? No. Rob, thanks. Could I ask you to stop sharing your screen, do you think, Rob?
Yep.
At this point. So I can see everybody. Hey, there you are. Great. Jane, did you get most of that?
I did, thank you. Yeah. I was just a little bit unclear as to where we really got to with the sort of the footpaths and the cycle paths, really. Ahead of this meeting, I did talk with, or had an email conversation with Anna Clark, who's the planning officer at Mendip that's actually dealing with the application. As this is a full application, I always ask the question, is there the possibility of any Section 106 funding for this? The response was that given that Section 106 was taken into account as part of the original outline application, the impacts of this application would have to be significantly more in order for there to be any Section 106 available from this application. But that said, I think what we're talking about initially would actually just be some surfacing, or perhaps even some better signposting to where those footpath links are, so that anybody coming from the town has a clear understanding of how to get there, rather than having to walk around on the main road, if that genuinely is their only way to get there. And also we have had a discussion with Aitchison and Aitchison as well about their proposals, and they seem quite keen to look at how they can serve walkers and cyclists getting to the site. And one of the things that we pointed out to them, and they acknowledged, was it's not just the surfacing of the path, but actually they operate on a shift system, as I'm sure some of the other businesses in the area do. And walking or cycling anywhere in the dark is not terribly nice prospect for many people. So I think as a whole, if there was any way that we could work together towards perhaps doing something about those footpath links without the need for any Section 106 money, really like the opportunity to talk about that further.
Could I maybe ask, sorry to come back in, is there a possibility of maybe annotating a plan that could be shared with ourselves, H&H, and the management company, to say that these are the areas, maybe this bit of surfacing, and hatch that area so we know what you're talking about, and this point we think signage would be most effective? Because I guess for the point that you raised about what Anna said, while it might not, as they're not likely to be obligations within a planning permission, it would be really helpful to make sure that you get the most bang for your buck. Because if there's things that can be done which are relatively economical, but H&H and ourselves can come together to deliver, then that makes sense. But if we can see all of the things that you're looking at, we can work out what's the cost of different things, and what's the way of being most effective.
I'm sure that's something that we can do. That's something that we will do.
Excellent, thanks, Jane. Anne, so you've got your hand up. You're on mute. Can't hear you. Still on mute. We've only been doing this a year, Anne. I can't hear a thing.
We can come back to you, Anne. Yeah. Janine Nash has also got her hand up. Shall I allow her to?
Yes,
Yeah. In respect of just tagging on to Jane's point, in respect of Aitchison and Aitchison, I sent back some separate feedback to them when they contacted me the other week. So I'm assuming that you guys already. So anything that I've sent to them will come to the management company and you will discuss. Or do I need to copy you into what I sent them?
I think just for transparency, if you can copy us in, and then we're not reliant on anyone else. I think if all relevant parties are part of the same conversation, that would be great.
Perfect. Okay, I'll forward that on then. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Do I copy that into you?
Rob's leading on the application, but if you could copy myself in as well, that'd be great. Have you got our contact details, or if not,
they're on the
maybe share them?
application, aren't they?
Yeah, I think Rob's are. I'm not sure that mine would be, because obviously Rob's down as agent.
I'll make sure you get it.
Okay.
Okay, I'll email it to Rob, and if you're happy to do that, that would be fantastic. Thank you.
Thanks, Janine.
Thank
And Anne, are we? You're live? No, you're not live. Okay. Thanks.
So Anne has put in the chat that she echoes Rich Ackroyd's point and make a plea for solar lighting along the cycle / footpath.
Great. Thanks, Anne. Yeah, I think that would be great. I mean, that would be excellent. Okay. Any other questions and comments? Jane.
Just a comment, really. There was the reference about Frico and the solar panels. One of our councillors, Lizzie Boyle, who's not actually able to be here this evening, did actually suggest in an email to me that the possibility of getting Frico involved and getting solar panels on the roof. So along with the plan that we're going to produce, I'll also put both parties in touch so that conversation can take place as well.
I've just texted her, Jane, just to say
that.
Okay. But
in which case, it might be useful to do a declaration of interest.
Yeah, although Lizzie isn't actually
here.
So yeah.
Yeah. Otherwise, we would. Okay. Great. Thanks, Rob. Thanks, Sharon. Thanks for your time. Thanks for the presentation. I think answered quite a number of questions, and yeah, as I say, thanks very much for the presentation.
No problem. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Jane, have you any close to having a statement for us, or is this something we need to?
I guess a lot of questions have been asked and answered, and I'm assuming that those answers have sort of dealt with the concerns, and it appears that aside from the things that we've talked about, in terms of the links and agreeing travel and that kind of thing. The other main concern perhaps was the noise issues, and we've heard what's been said about the environmental health or environmental protection officer, however you want to refer to them, and I've seen many a noise impact assessment, and have understood very little of what I've read in those noise impact assessments, because they are very technical documents. But I think what I'm sensing is that we totally welcome bringing employment that will certainly serve the town and the surrounding area. There is a concern about the noise, but if the environmental health officer at Mendip is happy with the assessment, and there is a mechanism in place whereby residents can actually report any issues they've had to both the management company and be assured that those will be dealt with, then I don't think overall there's any objection, subject to the noise assessment being approved by the environmental health officer at Mendip.
Yep.
And I'm sensing that's what councillors think, and if you're happy with that, I can then put that into a form of words.
Sure. I see Paul.
Can we presume we can add comments regards active travel, etc., bike paths, and all those kind of things. So yeah, great.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, certainly. Hannah.
Janine Nash has got a question as well.
Okay. Yeah, please do.
Thank you very much. I just I did pick up on the nuance between the recognition from them that what the noise levels as decided by the environmental health officer and what actually translates in real life to the actual residents who have to listen to it. He did recognise that the acceptable levels as determined by the environmental health officers may not actually represent what's acceptable to the actual residents in practice. And I think that there's something there that we need to concentrate on, because I think if we stick to accepting what the environmental health officer decides, then we could be in danger of underrepresenting the residents' concerns. And I know from personal experience, in developments in Bath, when I was at Baines, we had an acceptable level of decibels in respect of the noise over the development, but in practice, when you actually visited the shops of the surrounding area, it was actually excruciating to listen to. And so even though it fell under the threshold of the noise levels as dictated by the environmental health, in practice it was excruciating, and when you actually experienced it firsthand, it was a very different thing. So I think I just wanted to highlight that nuance and to say let's not take the environmental health officer's recommendation as the base level. Let's try and push for something better. I don't know if anyone agrees with me.
I don't disagree with you, Janine. I'm just wondering how we can do that at the end of the day.
That was going to be my question, really. I mean, I think really, I suppose I was trying to say something similar to that with regards to a mechanism being in place through the management company, in perhaps involving the environmental health officer as to how residents' concerns about noise can be dealt with. Because I mean, you're absolutely right. There are nationally prescribed acceptable noise levels, but whether that is acceptable to the person who lives next to it is a very different matter. I will try and word that in such a way that reflects that. Whether or not that is something that could be conditioned along those lines, I'm not sure, but I'd certainly take on board what you've said.
I think I got from him that there might be I mean, I don't know if anybody else took from this or if this is just my imagination and it's what I'd like to hear, but I kind of got the impression that's something that they were subject to discuss kind of offline, almost outside of the planning process. And I wondered whether the time to address the existing noise levels is now. And then if we can find a benchmark between now and planning board as to what we think is acceptable, then maybe we can push that into planning board as a consideration. But I don't really know how we go about that. I'm absolutely clueless there.
Perhaps we could invite, I think Rob and Geraint are still on the call. Perhaps we could just invite them to clarify that point.
Thank you.
Hi all.
Listening
quietly in the background. I think the critical point is, and the distinction I was making was that what you can ask for through planning, sometimes you get a perception of noise, which so at some point planning needs to make a decision as to what's acceptable and what's not. And you won't find 100% of people agreeing. And so planning tries to draw a line where it says that balance is that's the limits that we could enforce on a developer, and that's what a planning application tends to try and bind you to. Actually, what we've got here is what you'd normally be controlled, the kind of limits you'd normally get on a planning application. The constraints that are on that were put in on the outline go significantly beyond what I would have normally expected to see on a planning permission if I was negotiating it and negotiating hard on the issue of noise. I did probably a couple of years ago, I think it might be when we were looking at the H&H scheme, pull a note of about sort of 3 or 4 page note which explains the controls that exist within the outline and the associated legal agreement which relate to noise. So maybe, Janine, what I could offer is if I could share that with you, then we could maybe have a further conversation to talk through what controls are in place now, because there's the assessment about the noise that would be generated, but there's also the wider controls of that exist that are dealt with by the management company and the underlying sort of section 106 and outline conditions, which we would be happy to be bound by. So my view is that those conditions and controls go above and beyond what you'd normally be expected to provide anyway. But if we can maybe talk through those, and if necessary, we can have our acoustic team come on a call with you and talk you through it, because I appreciate it is a technical issue. Maybe help you understand how that's dealt with, and I guess that would help the relationship for the future, so you know if things are being raised, who to go to and what the basis was for that those levels of control in the first place.
That would be really helpful. Yes, please. Thank you. Can I bring my husband? He understands acoustics.
As long as I can bring my acoustic consultant.
Brilliant. Thank you. So can I sort that out with you offline? How do I?
If you contact through Rob, and if everything goes through Rob in the first instance, and then Rob can coordinate the team.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Would you mind sharing that the document with me as well, just so that I've got it for future reference?
Yeah, maybe if those emails go into Rob, if you stay copied in on those, Jane, perfect. And then everyone's seeing everything.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Great. Thanks very much. So do we need to make a statement now, Jane?
I think, as we sort of generally do with the larger applications that we discuss, I just sort of praise you what I've heard. So the comments from Paul about the cycle storage, talking about the green travel routes and the plan for cycle and footpath links, and solar lighting in the footpaths as well. We talking about the solar panels and making contact with Freeco. I've completely lost my thread. Oh, and yes, the noise issues. And if you're happy for me to put together, so I don't think we're not talking about an objection here. We're broadly supportive, but we would like consideration given to these issues. Then if you're happy to delegate me to put that into a letter, perhaps sign off by Steve and Paul as the vice chair. That's what I would propose.
I would totally agree with that. Can I just take a vote for the record? If all councillors are in agreement with that, and Jane, Paul, and myself will come up with a letter which will circulate.
Okay, that's unanimous. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Once again, thanks Rob, thanks Sharon, thanks district councillors for your input. Excellent. And moving on, I think we're going to discuss the Blue House now. Is that right, Jane?
We are, and I see that we have Bill Lowe here, and I'm not sure whether or not he would like to make any comment on that. Perhaps if he could. We transferred him over already.
There you are, Jane.
Thank you. Would you like to make a comment, Bill?
Yeah, it's basically a statement on behalf of the trustees of the Blue House CIO. Obviously, the Blue House is a very important building, and we're
We've lost you, Bill.
Oh dear. Okay, well, perhaps while we're waiting for Bill to come back online, so this is actually an application for tree works, Just bear with me a second. So the description of the works. So these are trees within a conservation area, hence why the application is required in the first place. The description is, bear with me. Oh, I'm not sure I can say that. Chanticleer pears, 4 to be felled. A rowan tree to be reduced until the tree is 1.5 metres below the overhead cable. A strawberry tree to be felled. A Monterey cypress to be felled. And reduced by, oh, sorry, T13 doesn't actually say what tree that is, to reduce by 6 metres in height and 3 metres spread. A poplar tree to be felled. Another poplar tree to reduce the north stem by 7 metres in height and 4 metres in spread. Another poplar tree to reduce the north stem by 7 metres height and 4 metres spread. A goat willow to be felled and a birch to be felled. So within the application documents, it sets out the reasons for the felling. So in respect of the pear trees, they are said to be damaging the parking surface and the walls of the bridge. The strawberry tree is damaging a wall. The cypress tree is preventing anything from growing under it. And from what I could see, that was an area within the grounds that can't really be used for anything else, because of the overshadowing. And the birch tree, oh, I've gone out of order, sorry. Oh, the poplar tree is dead. The goat willow is nearly dead. The birch has an open basal cavity that is rotting. And so they're the main reasons for the felling. The tree report that has accompanies the application, appears to be a very comprehensive tree report carried out by a professional tree surgeon. I suppose really the only question is about replacement trees. I wonder if we can try Bill again, maybe see if we can get him back.
Hello?
Hello, yes, there you are.
Success. Right, yeah, the replacement trees are going to be juniper, scopularum, which is skyrocket, a very columnar tree. These will formally complement the central classical Baroque facade of the main part of the building. They only require regular trimming and not repeated surgery. The problem we've got is that every 2 years we have to get a tree surgeon in to crown thin the existing Chanticleer pears. And all this does is deform the tree, and it encourages the root growth, which is causing the problem to the Grade 1 listed bridge, which was built in the 17th century and attached to the later 18th century Blue House building. And it's very unusual, I would almost say it's unique, to actually see a classically designed building which has got mature trees in front of it, because the object of the building is and was for the promoters of the buildings, for their patronage to be seen by the town. It wasn't meant to hide this superb facade of the building. So we're going to replace the existing trees with junipers, which are just going to set the building in its proper context. With regard to the Monterey cypress, this is a really big tree which is going to continue growing, and it just completely shades everything else in the rear triangle garden. And what we want to do is to make that space usable for residents to be able to sit and have a riverside view. As Jane has said, the other trees are basically dead or causing structural damage in the case of the strawberry tree, which is affecting the stability of the screen wall to the drainage channel to the south of the site. the grey poplars on Willow Vale, we want to do some work to those in order that the branches don't fall onto number 5 and 5A Willow Vale in a strong wind. So we would cut those back, and we've notified the residents of 5 and 5A Willow Vale accordingly. Yes, as Jane has said, we've got a couple of trees that are actually dead and do need to be removed for safety reasons. So, and we're well aware of the climate emergency and the perceived intrinsic value of this tree cover, but we do play our part by being a largely car-free development in the town centre. And we hope that we have the town council support for what the trustees want to do. And we've given it very serious consideration, and every 5 years we do have a tree survey done, and now has come the time to actually do something about the Chanticleer pears, which in retrospect it was misguided, although well-meaning, to actually plant them into the masonry of the bridge that is the forecourt to the Blue House. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Bill. Any questions or comments from councillors? Rich.
Just a quick one. I think, Bill, it's a very comprehensive tree survey, and you do a really good job over there. I've got a feeling when you last spoke to us, you mentioned that there might be some tree issues coming up, so it wasn't a complete surprise. It's sad, but I think you've given us the right reasons why they have to go, and I'm sure you're going to replace with excellent foliage and make those gardens look really good. So
we're here for the long term, Chairman.
Thanks, Mark. I agree with Rich. I think it's very good, report, and I haven't got any questions or complaints from my side. Any other councillors? If not, I think we just go straight for a vote. Yeah. So could I give someone to propose no objection, please? John, thank you. Sheila, second. And all those in favour? Great.
That's unanimous.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you for...
Sorry about the technical glitch at the start.
Apologies you had to wait so long.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're on mute, Steve.
I've been doing this for a year, I think. Caxton Road next, I think, Jane.
Yes, thank you. So this is application number 500 on our list. It is for Caxton Road, Frome, and as you'll be aware, that there is some consent for the housing to be built on this site, and what's being applied for now is to vary condition 1. So condition 1 lists out the drawings that were approved for the development. Also a variation to condition number 11, which talks about the provision of the public footpaths and the time or the point within the development at which they have to bring those paths forward. The description then goes on to say that the variations to the approved drawings include the replacement of 2 open market dwellings with 4 one-bedroom affordable flats, taking the overall dwelling total from 157 to 159, where the outline permits up to 160. Amendments to the external design of the apartment block 5, including revisions to the bin and cycle stores, variation of condition 11, which is the public footpaths, to change the implementation for the provision of the public footpaths, including the Riverside Boardwalk path. That's quite a long, complicated description, but I'll break that down and set out the reasons why the application's been made. So in terms of the flats, the 1-bedroom affordable flats, their amendments are being made in accordance with requirements of the affordable housing providers who eventually take over these units. The description appears to say that there will actually be an extra amount, or at least an extra 2 affordable flats that will be as a result of losing 2 of the open market dwellings. However, when you look at the plans in more detail, the original scheme, the approved scheme that's currently being built out, provided 18 affordable units in total. That comprised of 13 shared ownership, which included starter homes, 5 affordable rent homes. This proposal will actually provide 14 affordable units in total, and that's made up of the 4 one-bed affordable homes that they're talking about, 6 one-bed starter homes, 1 two-bed affordable home, and 3 two-bed shared ownership. So whilst this proposal will increase the overall amount of dwellings by 2 houses, it actually means a reduction in the amount of affordable housing that's going to be provided. The reason that has happened is because the block of starter homes that was previously approved, because the units had shared entrances that then went off into the separate entrances into the actual dwellings themselves, the housing provider has said that that is no longer acceptable. So in order that each house can have its own entrance, the amount of units, the amount of starter units that were in that block has also been reduced. So therefore the 2 market houses that have been lost are actually making up for the reduction of those starter homes. There is a statement within the design and access statement that points out that actually the outline permission only required 5% of affordable housing, and because they had increased that within their reserve matters application, the loss of the affordable units from 18 to 14 still takes them within the 5% that was approved at the outline stage. Did any of that make sense? Good.
Yeah. Basically, they're reducing the number of affordable housing without actually saying they're reducing the number of affordable housing. Yes. That's the way I read it. I know we've been going for an hour and a half, but
I have referred back. In fairness, they have stated that within their design and access statement that is the case, and I've referenced back to the reserve matters application where the plan shows the layout and location of the affordable units, how they're spread across the site. And yes, I mean, it clearly is a reduction in affordable units. The only difference is now that 4 of those units are on a separate part of the site, whereas before they were all in essentially in one block. And so in addition to the issue of the affordable housing, there is also the variation of the condition regarding the implementation of the footpaths. Previously, it set out that it should be done in such a way, I think it was before the 75th dwelling was completed, occupied. May have got that backwards. But that was assuming that the dwellings were built in a certain order, so top to bottom. But now they're actually saying that they would. There is still a commitment to provide those paths, but they will be built before the final 25% of houses are occupied. And I think that's just because of the equipment that's required on site and how it affects the build process. So I can't see that that's an issue. There is still a commitment for those paths to be brought forward.
Thanks, Jane. Paul.
I just wanted to clarify something. Actually, I mean, I totally agree with the inference of what Jane said and what Steve said, that this is obviously a reduction in affordable housing and is really hidden in the application. It's not very apparent at all. But just really for clarity, looking back at the previous application with the affordable housing strategy, I think they call it, marked out. I think before it was all in one block, where now we have a tag that says 6 times 1 bed flats to form starter homes. So the original block where the affordable housing goes has actually got 0 affordable housing on now, and all the affordable housing is elsewhere on the site. That's right, isn't it? So there's the 2 market houses which have been turned now into 4 1-bed flats, but then there also is some other affordable housing more to the north, northwest, I guess, which is, I don't think was affordable housing before, but maybe it was. I maybe have forgotten, but I seem to remember seeing the other plan that all the affordable housing was in one block, and that block is no longer affordable housing at all. It's now starter homes.
I can't get the links to work within my document.
I couldn't get a link to work either. No,
it did work before. I must admit, when I looked at it, I did think that the original block that included the majority of the starter homes was still going to be part of the affordable housing in this scheme, but it would be a reduced amount within that block to enable it to accommodate the independent entrances into the buildings. But
still part of the affordable, yeah, did you say?
Yeah.
Because it doesn't appear to be looking at the
starter homes, they were described as.
They're starter homes, yeah.
Which they are counting as part of their affordable provision.
Are they?
Yeah.
Okay. Because I mean, I'm just looking at the affordable 10-year strategy plan as it's shown, and the affordables are coloured in, and that isn't coloured in.
It's a different colour, isn't it?
No, it's white. So they've got orange and pink elsewhere, but that block is just blank.
Oh. Okay.
This is in this current application, but I mean, maybe it's kind of immaterial in a way, really, because the point is there's less affordable housing. But on the positive side, it does appear to be that the affordable housing that there is, even though it's reduced, is kind of a bit more spread across the site rather than all in one block as it was before.
Yeah. Indeed. Yeah. Rich.
Jane, do you remember we had a comment from a member of the public about they were building one block differently? The car park was at the front or at the back rather than at the front or the back.
You're kind of breaking up a bit now.
Different to the master plan. Is this the same? Are we saying? Oh, sorry. Started building this already.
Yeah, I reckon they have.
Yeah.
To these new proposals.
I don't know whether she would be happy, but it might be worth bringing Helen in on this point, because I know that she has visited the site and may be able to give us some information on that.
Sorry, I'm not quite sure what the question is, but I think this is possibly something separate, because there is a block of flats to the northeast of the site, sort of in the corner, that backs onto Butler's Gardens, and I've had a complaint, and I think you have too, from a resident saying that they didn't expect it to be as high. I've also had a complaint just last week when I was on holiday from a gentleman at the end of Butler's Gardens, who is next to what's going to be the neighbourhood centre, which also has flats on top, and he didn't expect it to be so high. So I'm not quite sure how to proceed, because whether to approach Acorn directly, I think I'll have to go through the planning officer first, but it is on my to-do list. I've already chased the first complaint, and I believe that the plan allowed for parking behind the building, and there is space for parking behind the building, between the building and the wall of the back of the garden at Butler's Gardens. But unfortunately, there is overlooking. There is overlooking, and you know, there are, I've discussed this with Jane already on the telephone, and that's not what we're here to talk about today, but there are sort of, we discussed there are 6 opportunities to make sure that doesn't happen. And the first is that the developer shouldn't build a building that's so large that overlooks neighbours. The second is that residents have a chance, they are consulted, so the residents affected have a chance to put in an objection and make a fuss about it. The third is that the planning officer should spot it. The fourth is that the parish or town council should spot it. The fifth is that the ward councillor, myself or Shane, should spot it. And the sixth is that the planning board should spot it. And on every single occasion, unfortunately, for this particular block of flats, nobody spotted that it was going to be so tall that it was going to overlook those gardens, those people in Butler's Gardens. But that is an aside, I think, to what we're talking about today, which is around the change in provision of affordable housing, and also the layout. What you haven't mentioned, Jane, is the layout to the street. So that particular street, which goes east-west, they've changed the house from, as you say, from was it a semi, 2 semis to 4, and then next door to that there was going to be another couple of semis, I think 2 sets of semis, I can't remember now, but they've changed that to 3 detached houses, and I don't think they should do that. My feeling is, if you then go to the end, to the corner of that east-west street, it meets with the main north-south avenue, and all down the north-south avenue they've got 3-storey houses. So in my view, there is a cross-section online. It makes it look as if the I don't know, it just doesn't look right in terms of massing, and I've already put a comment in about that, and I've suggested that instead of having 3 detached buildings now, they should have, especially because they're saying that they're quite big on energy efficiency, you're actually creating more opportunities for heat loss, and it would be better to have 4 houses in a terrace, and that would create a sort of a bigger mass. They'd get an extra house, probably not as an expensive a house as a detached, and there may be an issue about where you would then have parking, but that's been my suggestion so far as a ward councillor.
So yeah, Rich, just to answer your question, that the complaint that was received, it was in relation to that area, but that is being dealt with separately, as Helen has just mentioned. But yes, I mean, it's a good point that Helen raised about the changes to the other houses. I was so focused on the fact that there was affordable houses being lost that I didn't actually put that within my description. But yeah, there are small other changes to the site layout in addition to that as well.
It sort of makes a bit of a mockery, doesn't it, of reserved matters, outline planning, whatever. If they're going to get planning permission and then change it, and sort of reduce the number of affordable houses by sort of over 20%, you sort of almost want to go back to them and say, you know, can we see a full plan again, rather than just little, piecemeal bits here and there, which are really, really difficult to find out what's going on. It beggars belief, quite frankly. It doesn't bode well for the future with Acorn, to be perfectly honest.
I mean, I can ask, if you like. I can ask why. I don't really buy into what their reasoning was.
No.
Which is
financial, Helen.
Well, yes, but why? I mean, it's going to be a matter of how many have we lost altogether? We've lost 4 units, 4 affordable housing units altogether.
Yeah,
we didn't have a lot to start with, and as I've put in the chat, it was something that we applauded them for when it went to reserved matters. We said that the previous administration should never have allowed it to go through with 5% at outline, and that we applauded the fact that as new owners of the site that they had increased it. I think they increased it to 13%, and now it's gone down to something like, I don't know, what do you say, 8% it works out of, something like that, Jane, something in the middle.
8.8, I think.
Yeah, which is pathetic. So yeah, I mean, I think it's worth. I'm in two minds about whether to refer this up to board, because there's such a lot going on in Keyford Ward. It's just yet something else to refer up to board. What do you?
I think it has to be, Helen. I mean,
think about that.
I mean, just for the future, we can't let developers get away with things like this, can we? Surely.
Well, if you all feel strongly that you want me to refer it up to board, we're losing 4 affordable housing units. Or, I mean, there may be other ways of dealing with it, which could be that I approach them directly. I mean, I have spoken to Luke Cleary before directly about this site. I've kept well away of the Saxon Vale one, but I have spoken to him directly about this one.
There's a couple of other. I think Janine wants to say something. I see Paul's got his hand up as well.
Yeah.
Go to Janine first, Paul, and then come to you.
So I'm just quickly scanning back over my letters, because I live in front of the development, and we've had 2 letters, and I think they're slightly different. One came in on the 1st of March with a change, and the second one came in on the 2nd of March with a change. And I just wanted to say I kind of agree with everything you're saying, really. I think, and I'm wary about what happened in Norton St Philip. Norton St Philip had their, is it Fortescue Fields development done, and what they detailed happened was that after the initial planning was accepted, they then were just given an onslaught of minor changes, and there was just so many minor changes to deal with that they slipped through a couple of really big changes which were massive. I mean, and what they did was they built one building much higher than was originally agreed, and they slipped it through subsequently as a minor, you know, in a barrage of other minor alterations. And it kind of worries me for Saxon Vale, and it feels, yeah, you know, to have 2 letters with ever such slightly differing wording in the space of 2 days just makes me slightly worried. Probably Helen and I should have a conversation about this as well and see if there's anything I can do. I know I'm not ward councillor, but I am a councillor who lives in front of the property. So Helen, I don't know if you, me and James should have a conversation about if there's anything we can, or anything you want me to help you with, or anything I should be considering. I just wanted to say that I completely agree, and I'm slightly worried about it now.
Okay, thanks.
Yes, I'm happy to meet up or have a Zoom or something with Jane as well for tactics. See if we can sort it out without it going to planning board. But if necessary, I will refer it up, because you have persuaded me. I should do.
Well, it's hard enough to get affordable housing in the first place without taking half of them away.
Yeah.
Okay. Paul, sorry.
Yeah, I was actually going to make the point that you've just been talking, or Helen's been talking about, that I think it should be referred to planning board. The reserve matters, I believe, was heard at planning board, and I noticed in some correspondence somewhere in the planning application that the agent is quite keen for it to be determined by the planning officer rather than go to planning board. But I think really it should be going to planning board, you know, for this significant change.
Yeah. Thanks, Paul. Any other comments, questions? No? I think we object, Jane.
I think we do. On the basis of the loss of the 4 affordable units. If I put that forward as our objection, I mean, is there any comment on the footpath element, or we've not really got any concerns about that? I'm picking up. Okay, and I will speak with Helen and Janine whenever suits them about how we deal with this. I mean, I would hope that the planning officer would put it to planning board anyway, but we'll see.
Sure. I think Helen just wants to jump in with another point.
Yeah, just a small thing. It actually relates to the Persimmon site above, and wondering why they've changed that two semi-detached houses into 4 flats. And I did wonder if it was because Persimmon have suggested that there's going to be an attenuation tank just next to it. I mean, I don't know if I would mind living next to an attenuation tank, but the other thing about the Persimmon thing that I spotted, and I don't know if you did when you heard it, because I didn't attend the meeting, was that I spent quite a lot of time, and that's possibly why I missed the overlooking issue, trying to get an access point on that corner of the site to link the Caxton Road site and the Persimmon site. But the Persimmon site, the road doesn't seem to extend. When I looked at the application, the road didn't seem to extend all the way down to the fence. So there was like this weird kind of 50 yards of no man's land where nobody was going to be responsible for the road. Did you already pick up on that when you did? All right, thanks a lot. All right, thanks. That's all I wanted to ask. Yeah.
Okay, so I will write with an objection on the basis that we've just discussed, if you're happy to agree that.
Great. Someone propose that, please. Thank you, John. Second by Rich. Thank you. All those in favour.
And that's unanimous. Thank you. Just see the top of John's head.
Great. What's the last one we were thinking of? Was Little Keyford, Lower Keyford, wasn't it? Trees.
Yeah. So this is, bear with me, number 503 on our list. The address is 61 Lower Keyford. The description essentially is quite long, but basically what it boils down to is they're proposing to fell 20 trees within the site. There is a report of sorts accompanying the application that sets out the reason for the felling of the trees, although I'm not 100% clear that it's whether or not it's been done by a professional tree surgeon. And you'll see from the notes that I sent round that Chris Stringer, our environment manager, actually had a look at the site for me, because he has more expertise in trees than myself. And he's put some comments in there that are within the notes. So yeah, I mean, I guess it's whether or not you feel that the loss of those trees is justified, the overall impact that will have on the, if you like, the street scene, the environment, and whether you feel that the proposals for the replacement planting are acceptable in that location.
Thanks, Jane. Sheila.
So I happened to walk over there today, crazily enough, walked to Sainsbury's through that back route, and the big sort of edge of Leylandii run up. None of it is actually on a public street, as far as I could tell. The Leylandii run up a little alleyway that goes into the estate, and the Leylandii are really massively over the pathway, and to be honest, I don't think there'd be any loss. And some of them are huge. Some of those, they clearly haven't been kept under control for a long time. And what I found weird is this is quite an enclosed space, and it looks like this house, which has a huge frontage, has the sort of overlapping land all at the back. Very few of the neighbours have anything. And so I was surprised that there's no comment from any neighbours, as far as I could tell. And wondered what the back of the garden, where most of the other trees are going to be felled, is just onto the estate, the industrial estate. And is this the one, unfortunately, I didn't manage to read Chris's notes, but is this the one that where they're wanting to replace something with a walnut tree?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because like a walnut tree is a massive tree. I mean, I'd be seriously worried about having a walnut tree that close to buildings, just for the light aspect. I mean, it won't undercut the buildings, I don't think, but it will block out a lot of light. But maybe they just wanted to cover the industrial buildings at the top end of the plot. I don't know. But I was surprised at their choice. They seem to want to choose things that will produce a product, something to eat from the new plants. So I certainly don't think losing the Leylandii would be any great loss. In fact, I think it would be a benefit, but it will mean the whole site is very overlooked. So I'm not surprised they want to replace them.
Thanks, Sheila. Any other comments?
I was just,
Hi, John.
I was just, we ask so much when people want to cut down an individual tree in their garden. And this is quite a large number of trees, and they haven't even done a proper tree report. Whereas people who want to just cut a little teeny tree in their garden, they actually go out to the trouble to do this. So I'm wondering, maybe there's no reason for it. And particularly with Sheila's point on Leylandii, that's no problem. But I'm just wondering, should we be asking for a little bit more thought into why they're cutting it all, perhaps? Because of the precedent we've set with all these other residents, we've asked to quite detailed questions when they just wanted to trim a tree that's just gone nuts.
I think that's a reasonable ask, actually, because there was really nothing on their application that I could see had anything explaining why they were doing it.
Yeah, I agree. I think Helen wants to jump in this one. Hi, Helen.
Hi, thank you. I've had a look at the satellite image of the area, and when the dairy extension was discussed, they wanted to chop down 4 trees along the back of between the dairy and the conservation of the old buildings by the mount. And then I was a bit upset that there was another application that went in behind where Scott Ward lives, where they also cut down a whole load of trees. Now, if they hadn't cut those trees down behind Scott's place, there would actually be a line of trees or hedges or green infrastructure, if you like, that went all the way along Little Keyford Lane. And it's one of the reasons why I'm trying to sort of save hedgerows and whatever in Little Keyford Lane, is because you actually have a line of a wildlife corridor for birds at any rate, going all the way along, and this is part of it, and it goes along the back of Lower Keyford, and then joins up with some houses further north that have also got big back gardens and lots of trees. And you could even say that green infrastructure extends as far as the Keyford Crossroads, because there's a big patch of green behind on the back of Rossiter's Hill. So, for me, there's an issue of just about loss of trees, I guess. I'm just saying that it feels as if, we're trying to keep some green infrastructure and we're just losing it. We can't, I don't think that's it's not a planning reason to reject it, but it is sad that whilst we've declared a climate emergency, as we discussed with the first application, we can't seem to apply it to these applications that are coming through, because it's private individuals and they have a right to do with what they want with their land. Also, I put on the chat that I looked at the consultee list and no neighbours have informed at all. So I was almost inclined, as I say, I've had a bit of a break. I'm almost inclined to print off a letter and just go and post it to every single person along there, telling them to, because I did that with the Loxhill surgery as well, because I just didn't think everybody had been told about it. And somebody did actually write quite a coherent, good objection. So might do the same for this one, Lower Keyford, and ask our planning officers why they haven't sent an application out. I don't know where the sign is in the street. I haven't been and checked it, and whether the neighbours will have seen it as a sign in the street.
They're not doing those at the moment, are they?
I certainly didn't see any. No.
Okay.
I think because of COVID, they're not putting the signs
I
up.
think they're expecting applicants to put signs up, aren't they? And then take a photograph of it.
All right, well, I'll speak to the planning officer about that and about, if necessary, extending the consultation period so that neighbours can have a say, because it does screen. The other thing I noticed, I've only just now had a quick look at the thing that they submitted, which we think might not be from a proper tree surgeon, but something they put together themselves, is that they've already felled or almost felled a couple that were blocking the view of the warehouse behind, and they're planning to take them down completely, and there doesn't really seem to be a reason for it. I'm not really sure of the reasoning. Some of them, I understand, have been storm damaged and therefore unstable, and there is another couple that they want to take down to allow a sycamore to grow up in its place, behind it, to give space for a sycamore. So I understand the logic of some of them being taken down, but not all of them.
Okay, thanks. I've got Rich and then Sheila again.
I just wondered if they needed a bit of proper advice, because a lot of the trees they're taking down are not good quality trees, let's be honest. But it seems to me they haven't got advice about what they might replace it with. So replacing it with sycamore, let's have a proper conversation and put some proper trees back. I might be more encouraged by it if they did that.
Good point. Very good point. Sheila.
Yeah, I certainly think that something, that's a good point, Rich, actually, but I certainly think something along that edge where there's, something like 10 Leylandii going to be taken down, it will completely open up that side. And also what's weird is the little path that runs up along that edge. Over the other side of that path is a triangular piece of scrap land that's just covered in brambles. It doesn't seem to have any, well, whoever owns it is not doing anything on it. And it's going to be it's just going to be odd, really odd. And unless they replace the Leylandii with a hedge, I think it will really open it all up for their neighbours. And I think their neighbours might object, actually.
Sorry, Paul?
Just a quick thing to add to that, really. We're obviously not tree experts, but my understanding is I think that sycamore, maybe the reason for sycamore is that it actually does grow quite quickly, so it'll provide screening relatively quickly. That might be the thinking behind it.
Thanks. There was another point that Chris picked up on, wasn't it? That all this work is taking place in the nesting season as well, which actually leads me back to what you said, Rich, about whether they need some advice as to what's going on. Maybe they don't. Can we do that, Jane? Can we? I don't have any suggested advice.
I think we could, but then we don't actually have anybody who is a qualified tree person. Whereas I would suggest that Bo Walsh, the tree officer at Mendip, who is, maybe the thing to do here is to suggest that he offers them some advice on more appropriate replacement planting.
So we're concerned about.
Yes, yeah, that's exactly the word I've got written down. Concerned. Yeah, so I mean, I was going to say that we are concerned about the loss of this amount of trees in the location. I would like a better understanding of why all these tree works are thought to be necessary, and we would welcome or advise the tree officer to provide some information on what might be a more appropriate replacement planting scheme in this location.
That sounds good to me. Any other comments, questions? Right. Can we go with what you just said, Jane?
If everybody's happy with that, then yes, that will be fine.
Someone's happy to propose that, please. Thanks, Mark. Seconded by Sheila. And great.
And that, I think, was unanimous. Yes, unanimous. Thank you. Ooh. So I hadn't necessarily flagged any others for discussion unless you would like to have a discussion around the proposed works and signage for 3 Marketplace Room, which is the Coventry Building Society.
Yes, Rich.
Just quickie, I think that's in the hands of the conservation officer, really. I'm pleased that they're still there. There's still going to be a building society. So as long as they don't wreck the building completely and the conservation officer is happy, I haven't got any issues.
Yeah. Great.
So unless there are any others that you specifically want to discuss, or if you're happy for those perhaps where I've made some comments in my notes to agree those.
Yeah, Sheila.
Sorry, I know it's late, but the only other one that I found really confusing was the one on Trinity Street, which is in a really key conservation area, and it was massively complicated. I mean, and I know you had some comments, Paul, but maybe you were happy in the end because there was a lot going on that. I couldn't understand it all, to be honest.
Carry on, Paul.
I didn't have any ultimately an objection to it. It didn't object to it in principle. I mean, the only comment I had really was, interestingly, to agree with the Civic Society that part of it, part of the rear extension was pretending to be 19th century. But the Civic Society obviously wanted to pretend, they want to pretend that it's 17th century or 18th century, whereas I think that it should actually be 21st century. Because that's when it's being built. But I mean, I don't think it's necessarily a reason to object to it. I think it's just a comment, really.
I see this house every day. It's at the bottom of my street. You can't see, it's unlikely that you'll see very much from anybody apart from being in that garden. We'll see what this pseudo extension looks like anyway. So it could be made of wattle and daub for all I know, and it's not going to look like anything from the street. So yeah, fine, go ahead. The fact the bit that people will see on Trinity Street will be much improved by the installation of much more sympathetic glazing than they've got the white PVC there at the moment.
Thanks.
Yeah,
most of the work seems to be all internal. I mean, I agree with Sheila. There's a lot going on in there, but we're never going to see it.
Okay. Any other?
Can I do something under any other business?
Yes.
I'm sorry, it's late.
Shall we do any other business?
We don't have any other business, but I guess that doesn't mean you can't.
Now, Helen. I think Julie wants to raise something as well, which I'm happy to raise.
Sorry.
Carry on, Helen.
It's just that at the last meeting, at the end of the list, and nobody raised any objections, there was a sycamore tree to be reduced by 2 meters, so the house next door to the pharmacy. So I just happened to be parked down there and I looked over the wall and I had a look at this tree, and basically it's not going to grow back. The application was to reduce it by 2 meters, I believe, but it's been left about 3 meters high, and it's just a tree trunk with a few other sort of arms on it. I don't think it's going to sprout again. I think it looks as if it's going to die. I don't know much about trees, but I don't know if you've got a comment on that. I mean, maybe I should just, it's my ward, I should just send a photo. I took a few photos. I maybe send it to Bo Walsh, but I don't really know when it says do a reduction of 2 meters. I was not expecting to just see what is effectively a large tree trunk that's left. Yeah, is that what you're saying, Rick?
I think both the man and the Sorry, Rich.
Yeah, I think pretty hard like that, you can hack it back quite a lot. It's fairly fast growing. It's a bit of a weed, to be honest.
Okay, all right, thanks. Thanks for the.
Yeah, of course, die hard.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Janine just wanted to raise the. There's been a bit of chat on social media, and I think I picked up something about the tree outside M&S.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I meant to say, yeah.
Someone was digging around. I think Chris Stringer's on the case on that one, Janine, from what I
Oh,
remember.
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just kind of wanted your thoughts, really, because I only got notification from Julian this evening, which I forwarded on to various places, including you guys. I mean, I assumed that you already knew, but.
I saw Julian's note as well. Yeah, I think Chris is on the case on that one. Yeah.
Perfect.
He is, yeah.
Great, thank you. Right, so over to Jane again.
Over to me again.
Well, yeah, we got to just do the rest of them, haven't we?
Oh yes, so that was it. If there are no others to be raised for discussion, if you are happy to agree that we send our standard no objection, or for me to factor in any comments, not necessarily objections, that may be received from councillors in respect of the other applications, which you have all looked at the plans of online prior to this meeting.
Indeed. Thank you, Jane. I'll propose that. Someone second it, please. Thanks, Rich. All those in favour? Thank you.
And that's unanimous. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, all. Right, that was a long one, wasn't it? And the next meeting is on the... Oh, it's the 1st of April. There you go.
My wedding anniversary.
Oh, really? Excellent.